San Pedro Cactus, huachuma. Huachuma probably means removing the head, which is a reference to adjusting the ego, finding some humility. And what prompted this stream is actually a really powerful, transformative, and even physically healing San Pedro, a couple of them actually over the last week or so. And because of that, I started thinking a lot more about this medicine. I primarily work with ayahuasca, and I did a lot of work with San Pedro really early on in my plant medicine journey. And, it's not that I didn't see the value in it, but for me, my ally was ayahuasca. And so I didn't really give it much thought. And I think that may have been a mistake, actually, because the rejuvenation that I experienced psychologically, emotionally, and physically, the feeling of being cleaner and clearer and more hopeful and present is actually pretty surprising. I did not take large doses. The first one was moderate, maybe, and the second was pretty mild. So to receive that level of renovation from a relatively mild couple of experiences is really impressive and interesting. So in this stream, I'm going to talk a little bit about the state I was in prior to this last couple of experiences. And then also I started looking through my old San Pedro experience videos, and I realized that I did an unsatisfactory job of explaining this one really sort of landmark experience, I guess. There were two with San Pedro that were sort of like formative, I guess. Just really hugely influential experiences. So let's share a little bit about that and talk about the medical applications. I actually have some anecdotes, things that I've heard from people that I know, their personal experiences that are pretty interesting in regards to the physical healing aspect of this. We'll also talk a little bit about the different strains. People ask me a lot about that. I don't have a ton of experience. I've only tried the two varieties, the San Pedro Ecuador, which is the classic San Pedro cactus, and here we have Peruvian torch, which is a little bit different, definitely noticeably different for sure, 100%, almost to the extent that you could consider them almost different substances, kind of. I don't know. It's a difficult thing to explain. And part of the reason for that is the entourage effect, because these cactuses, the soil they're grown in, the temperature, the altitude, the prevalence of insects that bite them, just different lineages. There's a lot of variation in the alkaloid profile of these cactuses. Some people say that even in the same cactus, you can have like extremely large variances in potency. So it's a really interesting subject, and let's get into it. All right. So I guess first let's talk about my most recent experience with this cactus. You guys that follow me know that I've had to have surgeries and all of this kind of stuff, other medical procedures, and I missed a bunch of productivity because of that, and it was a huge financial burden. And around the time that I had the surgeries, I started to notice that my foot was kind of turning purple and my toes were swelling, and that's not a good sign. But it was kind of overshadowed by the surgeries because they're surgeries, and it was a double hernia, right? So 20 years ago or something, I was lifting a hot tub with a couple guys and they let go, and I suddenly had 1,100 pounds in my hand, and I stiffened somehow. It felt like getting hit by lightning, and I've been hit by lightning, so I would know. So anyways, I also noticed that I was feeling really fatigued all the time, and vision was getting kind of blurry. I started thinking maybe it was diabetes, and my blood sugar's fine. And I haven't, I mean, I've eaten organic and unprocessed foods for most of my life, really, and certainly not a lot of white sugar or anything like that. So that didn't seem likely. And then I started thinking, well, I used to do a ton of DRU whatever's algorithm, and I could have liver or kidney damage, I guess, but my kidney function seems fine and my liver function seems fine. But I was bitten by an insect in the jungle that gave me Chagas. And people that survive Chagas generally only live like 1 to 5 years because it does a lot of damage to your heart. And so a couple of years ago, I actually had an MRI, and he said, yeah, only 3/4 of your heart is working. And so that's not good. But, he said, you don't really need to do anything but avoid alcohol and don't try not to get too stressed out and blah, blah, blah. So short story basically being it's probably cardiovascular problem, which isn't good. It's not good. So I'm dealing with all that because it was really, in terms of like, attitude, optimism, to have to deal with this surgery, and we're financially affected by it. And I'm thinking, okay, couple of, 6 weeks or whatever, I'm back on my feet. I'll be raging, be able to work out again now that the hernias are gone. And nope, so this issue starts getting kind of worse. And then on top of that, I have this like memory resurface. And it was so fundamental to my life, this thing that I recalled. It's not really a memory resurfacing so much as a connection that I didn't make. And so now I'm dealing with all this regret on top of it. And because of the nature of this thing, it sort of unleashed all this other stuff. Like my mom unalived herself, and I just left my band in California. And this first thing that I made the connection with made me realize I only did that because of my mom's, and I was like, man, I would not have done that if I had consciously been aware of why I was doing it, So there's like this whole cascade of stuff that's coming down on me while I'm feeling helpless and broke and, inadequate. And just, I mean, it was just getting heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. And I couldn't really drink a lot of ayahuasca, which I'm kind of still on the fence about. I feel like I should do it immediately. Partly because during the surgery period, I couldn't do it because vomiting could have exploded things, and that's not good. And I had medications I had to take that were contraindicated. And then I started noticing this other problem, which could indicate heart or kidney, which is contraindicated with ayahuasca. If I drank the ayahuasca, I probably could have gotten an answer, and people have been asking me, like, why didn't you do that? Well, because I couldn't, So at any rate, San Pedro stepped into the picture. I don't know why. I guess I thought, all right, I got to do something. I could tell that there was a thick fog settling on me, and I had to do something about it. So I didn't even realize it was Father's Day. And we went to Parque de la Papa, which is potato really, but still papa. And we were looking for these petroglyphs. I guess they're 5,000 years old, and they are mostly llamas having sex. We didn't know they were there. We just, there was a sign, and we took the collectivo down, and we never found them. But I ended up laying on the hill up there in the mountains, staring at the sky. San Pedro was relatively strong, and just went through the whole thing. My God, I'm almost 50 years old. Just another 4 years, and looking at my hands, and they're a little bit discolored from the pulmonary edema from the whatever's going on, my heart issue or whatever is a little purple in there, and they were kind of shaking, and my foot's paralyzed on top of being a little bit purple, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, I'm falling apart. And like I went through this whole big process. I'm not going to get into all of it because, the obvious reasons, but I cycled through all of this stuff that I hadn't quite sorted out and that I had been kind of stuck with in a matter of probably 30 or 45 minutes. And by the end of it, I was kind of thinking like, well, what if you're only halfway through your life? You know, and I kind of realized that I had like figured, well, I better start getting my affairs in order because, you know, and I mean, that still could be true. This is a very dangerous situation. I could have a blood clot if I have, you know, clogged arteries or something, and I could have a stroke right now. Like apparently I'm at very high risk for that. Um, but just processing all this stuff with this like relatively moderate dose of this cactus, by the time I got up and started walking again, I felt a lot better, you know. And by the time we got to town, um, yeah, it's just I guess what I'm trying to convey is the amount of the quantity of information and connections that are made, all of this processing that occurred in just a couple of hours, and the dramatic change that resulted from it's extraordinary. So unfortunately, I had decided that it was. I heard the circus was in town, and I had never brought my son to a circus, and it turned out to be this like sleazy, you know, like Latin America bottom of the barrel, like since when are crackheads considered circus animals kind of affair, you know? And we were standing in line, and the only other person there is actually somebody from the community that I've known for years. A lot of you guys have interacted with, and so I had some rape with him, and that kind of helped. But we're sitting front row, and there's like these crackhead clowns throwing balloons at us and loud blaring music, and then they brought out like this little demoness, 4-foot Brazilian girl contortionist walking on her face and stuff, and it was just super weird. But anyways, when I got home, I'm sitting with my partner and kind of talking to her, and I realized I was kicking my foot. And it took me a second to click. That's the paralyzed foot. How am I doing that? So I realized that the San Pedro had actually not completely, like maybe only like 15% or something I have back, but I couldn't lift it at all prior to drinking the San Pedro. And then afterwards I could, which was not that much of a surprise. I was honestly kind of expecting that that could happen. And there's a number of reasons. One of them is that it's possible that brain or small blood clots have already hit my brain, and they're not big enough to cause a stroke, but enough to cause some brain damage, and that's what's affected the mobility in my ankle. They also have. Hold on, let me look at my. By the way, you guys, I just did a blog on Substack that has a ton of information. I might actually just share my screen. Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we just pull this blog up for all of us? Have a look. How do I do that? Shrink me. And then it's display capture. But now I'm gone. I don't want to be completely gone. There we go. Okay, so here we are. Let me check the chat real quick and see how you guys are doing. Make sure my audio is okay. Sure thing, J Lizard. Also, I want to thank a new patron. Several of them actually. J. Ron Janice, Rebecca Little, Dwayne. I don't know if I thanked you before. Laurentius, Danny Alexander. Thank all of you guys for joining the Patreon because we need your support right now. Trust me on that one. Yeah, so now, by the way, just to like finish that up, I have to go see a specialist, and we are just so tired of medical bills right now. I thought F11 made it go full screen. Why isn't it working? All right, whatever. Okay, so this is the classic San Pedro. This is the one that we have here, which is Echinopsis peruviana. It says it's stronger, you know, the typical, but in my experience, I don't know that that's true. It's different. Where was I on this, though? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. That's actually in a different place. Let me pull up Perplexity real quick because this was when I was doing research that I found all this. It's actually pretty interesting why the nerves, that's what we were talking about, why the nerves in my, or the, it's not the nerves in my foot, the mobility, I guess. Okay, so basically my suspicion was that neurogenesis, if there can be neurogenesis and enhanced neuroplasticity, perhaps there's some effect on like larger nerves. And it turns out San Pedro, because there's tyramine and hordenine, that it could increase serotonin and neuroepinephrine levels, potentially reducing inflammation or enhancing nerve signaling. This might alleviate compression related to nerve dysfunction. A study on mescaline analogs noted blockade of acetylcholine release and effects on potassium channels, which could stabilize damaged nerves or reduce neuropathic pain signals. Neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, psychedelics like mescaline are linked to enhanced neuroplasticity, including neurite growth and synaptic remodeling. While most research focuses on the central nervous system, similar mechanisms might support peripheral nerve repair. Increased brain neurotrophic factor levels associated with psychedelics could theoretically promote nerve regeneration. So, you know, if there were tiny little blood clots that had like damaged my brain, then they were regenerated and remodeled those pathways potentially a little bit. Which doesn't explain a lot of the other stuff, but we'll get there. Psychology and subjective factors. Psychedelic state often enhances mood, mind-body awareness, potentially allowing users to perceive healing processes more acutely. Now, that's silly because I couldn't move it at all. I drink the San Pedro. I can move it, you know, I mean, that's not like noticing, oh, it's getting better. You know, believe me, I've been checking. Stress reduction reduces influence. That's not really that. Changing pain perception, potassium channel modulation. San Pedro alkaloids may stabilize damaged nerve membranes, interrupting pathological pain signals. Neurogenerative mechanisms, we already kind of talked about that. Sigma-1 receptor activation associated with psychedelics enhances nerve repair processes, including axonal growth and remyelination. This could explain gradual functional recovery in chronic cases. Nervous system rebalancing through sympathovagal coactivation, the intense pins and needles sensation. So what I had told it is that when I wake up, I have pins and needles in my extremities, right? And it got crazy when I drank the San Pedro in that foot. And I was thinking, man, it feels like something's getting worked on in there, you know? So that's what it's referencing. And that vagal rebound, post-stress recovery phases show increased parasympathetic activity linked to BDNF release and reduced inflammation. Temporary increased metabolic activity may jumpstart dormant neural pathways. This dual activation creates a neurophysiological state conducive to repair, potentially explaining why symptoms improved after months of stagnation. Anti-inflammatory and antioxidant action. San Pedro demonstrates anti-inflammatory properties which could reduce swelling around compressed nerves from hernia surgery. Oxidative stress reduction may protect nerves from secondary damage during recovery. Enhanced interoception. The psychedelic state increases body awareness, potentially allowing conscious perception of nerve reactivation processes. Some of this is repetitive, so let's... Okay, so that's that. So yeah, and then what I was looking for in here is the list of the other alkaloids and the things that they may contribute to the experience. So you can see those there. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that I discovered afterwards that San Pedro can do. And this is really interesting because it's almost like I intuitively kind of knew that I was going to need this medicine. We really came here because of this mystery that I've been working on basically my entire life that kind of revolves around a connection between the sun and consciousness. And then gold kind of entered into the picture. And I just thought about the Incas and the Inti, the sun god, and I just thought, well, you know, we've done the Amazon thing for years now. Let's go to the Sacred Valley and talk to the sun. And I didn't know that there was the solar maximum was coming. So my plan was to get up into high elevation and try to establish that solar connection more deeply by working with San Pedro more. Then come to find out that I was diagnosed pre-diabetic, but not diabetic at the same time that I got the heart MRI. And traditionally, San Pedro is used to treat diabetes. It also is used to treat pulmonary disease and cardiovascular problems, which is the other thing that it could be, or both, So, and then kidneys, which was the other thing on the list. Not as likely because my creatinine levels are, but you know what I mean? It's just weirdly applied to every one of the possible issues that I'm having. And also, I said I was going to share anecdote. A friend of mine in Ecuador had severe asthma. And he went to a town called Montanita, which is very famous for its open party scene, where it's like nothing is illegal and everything is there. So he was there, and he had an asthma attack. And for him, these were debilitating and potentially life-threatening. And he had no money at all. And he had his guitar with him. So he went to a couple of pharmacies and he was begging them, can I just give you my guitar and, just give me the inhaler and you can give me the guitar back when I pay you for it. And they all said no. And I guess somebody saw this that was walking by and they said, hey, I'm on my way to a San Pedro ceremony. You should come. And he's like, okay. So he goes and he said the first cup of San Pedro, that stopped the asthma attack and he never had one ever again. So over the years, when I ran into San Pedro shaman and I also did, internet research and confirmed that is one of the traditional uses. And, and according to my friend, he had never heard that before. He didn't know anything about plant medicine. So long story short, there are probably a tremendous number of applications for physical problems with this medicine. And the mind-body connection is pretty well established. And I think that what I was referring to earlier with the alkaloids and the entourage effect, we have a very sophisticated system sitting behind our forehead, right? And if you look at the application of various psychedelic compounds, there is this weird overlap because I think they bring down filters in the nervous system, and that overlap is things that we can perceive when that filtration system is reduced or deactivated, right? So you see the same kind of like rainbowy, translucent color information patterns hanging in the air when you take mushrooms, LSD, mescaline, whatever, it's very, very similar, if not the same. But then there are all these little differences, like with the visuals of mescaline, you tend to have these little pixels of they're super tiny. It's still a little rainbow, it kind of looks like informational patterns hanging in the air and ribbons or something. I don't know how to describe it, but something along those lines, like you're seeing more of the bandwidth of the full spectrum of light. And my theory about that is that light contains other types of information, the same way that the light spectrum we perceive carries visual information. This is why our pupils dilate in full light when we take psychedelics. That's what they're accommodating. Getting a little bit off base here, though. Where was I going with all that? So there's this overlap, but then there is increased efficacy for different compounds for different situations, right? For example, someone that has extreme anxiety and PTSD may not react well to mescaline or LSD, but ketamine will not freak them out. And it does kind of the same thing, like the real basic version. You can administer it to someone who might panic on different psychedelics, and they would derive benefit from the ketamine without that risk, things like that. Empathogens like MDMA, they're phenethylamines, which is what mescaline is. right? Mescaline is actually more closely related to phenethylamine and ephedrine than it is to LSD or psilocybin. These compounds help with relationships much more than LSD, and also forgiving yourself for things, forgiving others, burying the hatchet, for expansion of the intellect. LSD, both in vitro and in situ, catalyzes neurogenesis and enhances neuroplasticity more than any other of the classical psychedelics. They all have these specific applications. And now that we're able to engineer chemicals in labs with such precision, and we have such advanced knowledge of our own neurochemistry and, how all of these things sort of interface and become metabolites and all of that sort of thing, what prodrugs do, we're basically able to engineer a compound for the full spectrum that the brain is able to process, is what I'm getting at. We're getting to that point, and a lot of these plants basically have that capacity just built into them, because they're not just producing one compound. When certain compounds degrade or they interact with other things and enzymes in the plant, they become other things. And so you end up with this massive cocktail of potentially bioactive compounds. And then you also have like mood modulating and vision, the visuals, are different, like all of those other components as well that shape this experience. So yeah, that's that. And this list here, I think, is actually not complete. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more than that. But it basically says that they might affect the onset speed, emotional tone, visual intensity, and create synergy or contrast with mescaline's effects, just like CBD modulates THC. CBD is not the only thing that modulates THC. CBN does as well, cannabidiol. THCV is weird, is super weird. Plants that contain that cause these auditory hallucinations that you can feel. It's not fun. I don't like that at all. Okay, so pachanoi, the original, the OG, gentle, wise, compassionate, healing, Peruviana, electric, energizing, visionary, Brigasi, deep, intense, cosmic, otherworldly. Scopocola, lucid, neutral, physically grounding. In other words, not very strong, I think. We've talked about a lot of that already. Cleansing the energetic body, diagnosing and treating physical illnesses, reconnecting with Pachamama and Taita Inti. Emotional release, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, heart tonic, cure for asthma and folk medicine. Contains mescaline, which is 3,4,5-trimethoxyphenethylamine. Its main active constituent is structurally related to both dopamine and ephedrine. We don't need to get into a lot of the rest of that, but if you subscribe to my Substack, you will receive a lot of value from that for sure. And also our website is there where you can order things from us that I cannot discuss here. I mean, maybe I can, I don't know, but I'm not gonna. All right, so let's get into some of the visions and whatnot, the experiences that I've had with this medicine. Also, I'll check the chat in a second and see if you guys have any questions or comments. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. We're demonetized, so we rely on our community for support, and we definitely appreciate it because apparently I'm getting old and things are going wrong. I mean, we'd appreciate it anyways, but there it is. That one and this one. Oh, yeah. All right. Where's the chat? Okay, so as far as the experience goes, When I started out with this plant, it was in Ecuador, and I didn't really know that much about it. You know, I had drank ayahuasca probably 11, 12 times or something, and I was aware that it was just kind of growing around, but I didn't realize how common it was in this area, or that in Malacatos there were gigantic forests of it. And there was one tree. Yeah, it was a tree for all intents and purposes. The trunk was as thick as an oak. And I mean, it was probably 25, 30 feet tall, and it had, 75 arms or something. I mean, it was absolutely massive. And if you don't believe me, actually, I think I can pull it up. Or you can. There's a video I made called the Ancient San Pedro Cactuses of Malacatos. And when I got there to make this video, actually, the big cactus had been cut down and it was strewn all over the ground. I mean, it's insane the mess that thing made because it was so massive. And man, what a bummer too. I don't know why they did that. I guess the landowner just decided he didn't want it there anymore. I don't know why. But then if you kept going down the trail into the mountains, there were more, not as big as that one, but there were a lot of them. You just kind of hike around and you would see them poking up through the canopy sometimes. I mean, they were just massive. So you could cut enough to last you a long time, you and all your friends, without putting a dent in the cactus at all. And so I was using these, and they say that older cactuses are much stronger because mescaline has a 50-year shelf life. And so it's constantly building up as water passes through the cactus. It's just kind of, it gets deposited there and it doesn't get any weaker. So it just builds over time, and the other alkaloids probably do as well. So, or you could say from a shamanic point of view that wisdom comes with age. So these abuelos, old and wise and powerful. And the first really intense experience I had, I guess, Enrica and I went up onto her parents owned a separate property where there was a top. They owned the top of this mountain, one side of it. And so we went up there and we drank a lot because I didn't really quite understand yet. This is not a very visual medicine generally, unless you take such a high dose that it's very difficult to manage. The reason for that is, and I don't think it's as bad with the Peruvian cactus in terms of these blackouts. I think it's one of the other alkaloids that does this. Also, it's traditional in most traditions I'm aware of to chew coca. I mean, people do it all the time anyways, but in particular with San Pedro in order to maintain focus because of this tendency to black out at really high doses. And, it's dangerous because you're running around in a blackout doing stuff and you're not cognizant. This is the reason also why most of you guys, if you go to retreats or whatever, you're not going to get that kind of dose because one of the best San Pedro shamans that I've known told me point blank, like, yeah, I serve Taurus medicine. I'm not dealing with, you know what I mean? I don't like, no, I'm not dealing with the meltdowns, So they generally don't do that because of this. So yeah, that's what I'm saying basically is that you're not going to get a ton of visuals, a little bit, but not a ton of visuals until it's a high enough dose that you need someone to assist you. And by the way, those doses last forever. I've had them last like 3 days. A client and I didn't sleep, I don't think, for 3 entire days. The last dose was like 4:00 in the afternoon on the first day or something. But anyways, point being, I was making really, really strong medicine, drinking a lot because I thought, well, it's not that strong because I don't, there's hardly any visuals. So man, we must need to drink a lot, and, so before we knew it, we were way out there. We were way, way out there on like the spirit plane. And I remember I didn't realize how far out we were because things don't look that weird, And Enrica was kind of acting bored and like yawning and stuff, and maybe she was trying to communicate that she had the same expectations, and she was kind of like, this isn't as cool as other psychedelics that, I don't see anything or whatever, I don't know what was going on. But I knew enough shamanic technique at this point that I knew that if you were in this state and you speak certain words, that things are going to happen. And I thought, well, this would be a great time to put that to the test. Partly because I was irritated with her boredom, I guess. And so I uttered something that invoked what people think of as like the Father, you know, the like terrifying aspect of God. And almost immediately, the air went ice cold. Enrica disappears from the tent, and there were all these cattle around us. And the cattle freaked out. They just were tripping over their legs, trying to, like, you know, stumbling, falling over in a panic to get away from whatever had just arrived. And I instantly felt like, man, I just fucked up. And suddenly there were these cables that like whipped. They were translucent, you know, they weren't like metal or rawhide or something, you know, they were like just energy cables, and they slashed through. I had the front of the tent open so I could see they slashed through the bushes, and I swear I could see leaves shoot up, and one of them landed like right across my neck. And I just thought, if I move right now, this thing, if one of those things touches me, whatever it's connected to can just turn me off. And I basically started groveling, you know, like, just don't hurt the girl, like whatever this, you know, kind of stuff. And it was like, don't grovel. And that's all it had to say for me to understand that, you know, what we've done here is unleashed our own consciousness. And if you, and it's not just yours, it's not exactly what I'm saying. You could say you have become integrated into a larger consciousness, or, but in a way, especially in terms of your experience of it, it is a reflection of you. So if you're on the ground groveling, and, you know, that's not going to be good. And this is actually reflected in the ayahuasca tradition that I was taught in, luckily, because I think that's what made me realize what I was doing. You know, you're not supposed to prostrate yourself on the ground when you pray. You sit up with respect, and you also, for yourself, you know, and you also don't try to placate a sky god. You send your will directly at the thing that you're trying to accomplish. That's what prayer is, you know, and it's not about avoiding acknowledgement of like a great spirit or anything like that. It's just that you already are that. And so this idea of sending prayer away or placating a deity or something, it's all you. So what are you talking about? And their concept was that you're actually nullifying your power by doing that, that you shouldn't do that. It's you directly dealing with whatever the influence is. Right. So I remembered that. And then there was some other dialogue that I'm not really going to get into. And eventually the cold air went away, and Enrique came back into the tent. There's something else that was really wild that happened that I'm still pretty convinced was real. Like, she has like it was like a alter ego or something, but it was like a spirit. It flew out of her. And I saw it hit the tent, and the way the tent moved and stuff. And like the personality of this thing, was like a part of her, you know, and I only saw it and interacted with it for a couple of seconds, but it's really stuck with me over the years. The intensity of the sort of archetypal representation that this thing had, you know, it was like a certain essence of a certain type, a certain aspect of femininity, completely isolated and incarnated, semi-incarnated in like a little translucent San Pedro demon or something, you know, like a little imp. And she was aware of it as well. I didn't say anything at the time, but she also perceived this thing. Yeah, so that was kind of the introduction to the high dosages. And so before I get into the next story, let me check the chat and see what's going on in there. No questions, no comments. All right, that's fine. And then, all right, so this one's a lot more interesting, actually, I guess. Oh, no, I didn't finish that actually. It's not about the story. A couple of weeks later, I was on a collectivo or a bus going to, not Cusco, that's where we are now, Cuenca, from Vilcabamba. And this really like renowned San Pedro shaman that I had been wanting to talk to, of course, got in and sat down beside me. And I was like, oh, well, that's convenient. You know, he's stuck here for an hour and a half with me and can't escape. And we started talking, and he just goes right into this thing. He said, yeah, when I was first working with the medicine, I had a lot more ego than I realized. And I went up on the mountain, and I was feeling all like, you know, I own this mountain, and there's all these giant cactuses, and I'm a shaman. And, you know, and he's like, I didn't realize it in the moment, but I was gloating a lot. And so I drank a bunch of medicine, and the mountain, my perception of it was that it was like the masculine aspect of the universal mind embodied, right? That's how I thought of it. But he thought of it as the mountain itself. And the same thing happened to him. He described the same exact thing. And, you know, he said that the air went cold and the mountain spirit, and it told me I could just turn you off. Those are the exact same words, exact words that I heard. I could just turn you off. And it went through the whole thing, the same lesson, the same way. You know, it was wild to hear this from this guy, Santiago, Vilcabamba. Yeah, so that was really the point of that story. It wasn't about the story. It was about the fact that apparently this is something that just happens to people in the early stages at high doses. Another thing that happens to people that is really, really interesting to me, and I think it's really important. I also think it's real. San Pedro is a solar medicine, right? So ayahuasca is consumed in the nighttime. It is water, you know, it grows in the Amazon and mud and close to water, usually by streams and stuff, you know. And it's generally perceived as feminine, although somebody did a blind study with people that hadn't been told anything one way or the other, and they 51% of them said it was female and 50% male. So this whole thing about Pachamama being a female spirit and all that, it's not, if you're not told that, apparently. So I don't know. That's always how I perceived it. And certainly I would say the experience of ayahuasca is night, it's body, it's water, it's, you know, aligns with feminine symbolism best. And San Pedro is masculine, and it's cerebral, and it's information, and it's light, and it's fire, and it's daytime, and it's desert, and you know what I mean? And so it's solar. And it puts you into direct dialogue with the light itself, in my opinion, and my experience, really, and in a lot of other people's experience. And so how I found that out, a couple of weeks after the Santiago conversation, I was at a friend's house, and I thought I had a band, and one of the guys was a cop. And I thought it would be great to give this cop some mescaline and also the rest of the band, and then rehearse that way once. So we really gel and get to know each other. And so I did that, but I'm still serving kind of like monstrous doses, you know. I mean, it wasn't like no one had a problem or anything, but it was still like way too much for like jamming, you know. So I actually drank by far the most. I think someone didn't finish their cup or something. I'll drink it. I can handle it, you know. Barely. So at one point, I don't remember why, but I sort of wandered away from everyone, and my friend had a not deserted, but like incomplete other house on his property that he just never finished building because he ran out of money or something. And so I went in there, and I didn't realize that I was barely conscious. And I was sitting on the floor, Indian style, and I was conversing with the cactus for a while. And it was pretty intense and uncomfortable, and I was definitely getting a little bit paranoid. Like I remember thinking that maybe I was in a prison, and that if I came out, like there were windows with no glass, and I was thinking if I went out them, there were like guards out there that would take me away and stuff. And I would catch myself thinking something like that, and I would go, uh-oh, you know, you need some breath and some tobacco, man. But before I could get some tobacco, you know, because we take tobacco through the nose to focus the mind. Before I could get the tobacco, my attention was called to close my eyes, and I was looking at what appeared to be about 80 billion miles that was just absolutely strewn in these infinitely small photons. And I knew there were photons, I knew there were light, and I just could not believe how many of them there were and how far I could see. And it was just absolutely just my mind exploded, And so I'm looking at one of these little sparkles, and I realize I can use my mind to pull it in closer. And as it gets closer, I see that it's morphing, kind of. And I had just seen a video that explained that tesseract, like one conceptualization of these things, is like there's a dimension in time, right? So they look like part of it's always disappearing and it's moving and like shifting around, but it's not. It's just that you can't perceive any more of it than where you have a vector with it in temporal, in time. So I'm pulling this thing and it's morphing and I'm going like, what the fuck, man? And so I understood that it was me, basically, or that I was one of them and that everyone was one of them. And that this is what Leibniz had conceived of as the monad. That every individual soul was on some level just a projection of a photon. And difficult to describe. I mean, there's more information in there, but it's hard to talk about. And so the thing goes back out and it gets real small again. And then the cactus is, so I'm understanding what this is, that these also are the particles that constitute the universe at the most fundamental level, like the smallest and most fundamental possible thing. And their intricacy, their arrangement was such that if any one of them was removed, the entire universe would be destroyed. And so the cactus entity says, watch this. And it took one out, put it out, and I ceased to exist. And it wasn't like darkness. It wasn't like clear, empty space. I was just gone. There was no observer anymore at all. And then I was just suddenly back. And that freaked me out. It was really uncomfortable. I'm not really sure I can even explain why exactly, but that nothingness was terrifying after the fact. And so the cactus started explaining what these things were and a little bit more about how it all worked. And I kind of already knew the answer to this, but it's been a big struggle for me to come to terms with my entire life. Like whether all of this evidence I've seen that there's some intelligence under the board is just like, selective perception and Dunning-Kruger. And, I know better, but there's part of me that's like the skeptic that you need, but sometimes it's a little bit louder than it should be, I think. And I asked, like, are you saying that it's all just totally random chaos that just like and it's like, no, man. And that it's the complete opposite of that. It's like every single little piece of it is so like specifically engineered that, it really is ridiculous that anyone can look at any part of it and think that there's no intelligence at least integrated into the system. So bunch of other weird dialogue with this cactus entity. And then I, realized that I'm no longer, needing to be isolated. And so I went back and found the group and, it was only like 20 minutes too, this whole period was not very long at all. It seemed like eternity, but I was shocked when I left the house and realized, hey, it's still like the light looks the same as it did when I went in there, And so a couple of weeks later, no, this is way longer than that, like a year, man. A year or so later, I happened to be walking through my neighbor's property, who his name was Mufufu, R.I.P. Mufufu. It was like a hippie commune, basically, something like a hippie commune. And there was a kid from Syria that had been through all kinds of war, and like, I knew he had a bunch of trauma. And he was like, "Hey, aren't you that San Pedro guy?" And I was like, "I guess so." And he's like, "Do you have any?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I would like to drink it." And I was like, "Okay, well, when?" And he's like, "Well, this afternoon." And I was like, I guess I could do that." And he's like, "No, no, no, man. I'm really traumatized. I don't trust anyone. I need to drink it by myself." And I was like, "You've never had it before?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "I'm not going to let you do that." And he's like, "Well, I won't drink a lot, And then I thought, well, I live right there. So I was like, okay, but I'm going to come and check on you every couple of hours just to make sure at least that you're, fine. I'm not going to just leave you completely alone. But as long as I come over here and see that you're cool, you know what I mean? Then I won't bother you, and I'll go, and you'll never even know I was checking on you. And he's like, "All right, that's fine." So I was like, okay. So I brought him what I thought was a relatively low dose, and I didn't really like it because I knew he had a lot of trauma, and, I was kind of on the fence about it. Nothing terrible happened, really. But I go home and I don't get any texts for a while, and I'm like, I should just go check on him. So I go over there, and I find him on his porch laying down, and he looks at me and he just goes, "There's trillions and trillions and billions are small and golden. They made, you know what I mean?" I knew exactly what he was looking at. It was that same sea of light. And I was like, "Oh, you're the vision of the photons, huh?" And he's like, apparently though, Mufufu had found him and his girlfriend like naked and raving in the bushes. So they did go a little bit out of their heads before I got there, got them dressed, put them back up on their porch. And so I stayed with him now, and there just happened to be a San Pedro shaman walking by earlier, I guess, when they were naked and raving. Go figure, right? And he was standing beside me. I didn't notice him yet. But we were talking about the photons and stuff, and I look over at the San Pedro shaman, and I'm like, "Hey, who are you?" And I talked to him for a second, and I was like, "Yeah, this thing with the photons." And he's like, "Well, it's just a conversation with the light, isn't it?" So, for those of you that are curious and don't have a crew to hold you down, just in case you have to be restrained, that's what a high dose of San Pedro does. It puts you in your most fundamental form as a unit of consciousness and its energetic geometrical structure. And the thing is, every single one of those little tiny photon consciousness bundles, they're all different shapes. Like, remember I was talking about how you can zoom them in and they morph and change, and they're all different. Every single one of the trillions, trillions, and trillions of them. So let me check in with the chat again. See how you guys are doing. What's going on, Judge Dredd? Kind of pre-diet too. Yeah. It's taking some what? I don't know what the Biden is taking San Pedro Cactus comments about. So yeah, those are the vision stories. I mean, other than those two, I don't really think I have any like really, really deep experiences with it. The main function that I have employed San Pedro for actually is in our relationship, my partner and I. Here's something here. I'll show you. Look at this. And this is actually the strain of cactus we were using back then too. I got to put my display capture back up. Is it up? Oh, wait, what's it? It's not working. Oh, I know what to do. I can just hide this one. Yeah. So look. And that's the truth, man. That's the bloody truth right there. It is a tremendously effective aphrodisiac, but more importantly, it facilitates a different kind of coitus, a very deep, profound bonding, and an enhancement that is like 5D, you know, it's completely holistic. And so it becomes an integration of two souls on every level. So it's extraordinarily useful for that. And on one occasion, I remember after one such endeavor, I was hiking alone down off the mountain. And there were two birds, a couple, that were flying right behind me the entire way down, like right behind my head, the entire way down the mountain, and also a little ring of butterflies that had translucent, like when the light hit it, it would refract. So they looked like crystals flying around. There's a lot of them in Ecuador. It definitely wasn't a hallucination, but it was the first time I'd seen them. So after this night of, you know, San Pedro enhanced romance, I'm walking down the mountain with birds flying around my head and a ring of crystalline butterflies. And I went down and rehearsed with my band. After being awake all night long, I just drank another like huge glug of San Pedro, at like 9 a.m, and then down the mountain with my butterflies and birds as my entourage. Played through rehearsal for like 3 hours and then went back up to the top of the mountain because Enrique didn't want to come down yet. God, I can't believe that was only a few years ago. Look at me now, just so busted up, paralyzed foot and everything. It's like, man, that happened fast. I will get it back though. Yeah, you know, but I'm sure you guys can tell if you're regular followers that I'm a little bit more lucid and a little bit, my attitude's a little bit better. You know, I had noticed that rewatching some of my streams looking for clips to cut for shorts and stuff that my attitude has gotten a little bit like cynical, you know, and like it's not just my life either. You know, look at the world right now. It's like, can we do anything about this? I think so, but some days not, you know? And yeah, so things were wearing on me. And regardless of the fact that like I'm not diagnosed still, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how we're even going to, you know, the financial stuff with all the tests and treatment and everything after the surgeries now, you know. But my attitude towards it all is like infinitely better. And like I said, it was just like one moderate dose. And then I think the next day it was the next day, I just took another swig and it, you know, I could feel it, but not a lot. And it was definitely a marked improvement over the first day. So there's your little crash course in San Pedro and my personal experiences. And I guess that's really all I have to say about that. If you guys have any questions or comments, I'll give you a few minutes to stick them in the chat. And if not, then remember we have still space in the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of August, I guess. Let's see, it's the 11th is full except for one person, August 11th till the 23rd. The 23rd, you could arrive. I think space for 4 in Sacred Valley for the San Pedro and, there'll be different activities, including ruin ceremonies, and it's going to be amazing. And then we're going to Manu in the jungle in November, and that has starting to fill up. Probably five spots still open. Also, go to our website for consultations, guitar lessons, products, and join the Patreon, please. We're demonetized, so we need your support. Okay, does anybody have anything for me? Nope. Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope that it was of service to you and of use, and I will see you tomorrow. Yeah, Athena, it would be great to see you again. She has drank with me before. Only once though, right? Yeah, it was just one night. But we hung out again after that. We went to play with a squirrel monkey together at the lagoons. All right, guys. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow. I don't know what we're gonna do, but it'll be longer than this for sure. I have some ideas.